session. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all excited to be here. Welcome to Tashkil, hosted by Whitespace, the design club of IIT Guwahati. We are absolutely delighted to have you all join here virtually today. I'm Ramana. I'll be a host for today's session.
Yes, and I'm Sajal. I'll also be a host. So, for those of you who were here yesterday, we went into two discussions with Nigank and Anubhav about corporate and how to not only get through your interviews or prepare for your interviews, but also navigate the life that you have in corporate. And we went into some great detail in all of the realms, be it personal life, professional life, or the balance of them both. So, yeah, we're really glad to have all of you join us today as well. And to the new people, welcome. And of course, Pingal, welcome so much. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right.
Yes, you're
Okay,
very,
that's great.
very rare to hear someone pronounce it right the first time, but
No, I have a similar issue, so I'd rather confirm.
okay.
So, okay, um, today we also have another industry professional with us, and Ramana can introduce him.
Yes. Today, we are honored to have Pingal Kakati for our first session of today's talk. Pingal is currently working as the Associate Director of Design at Razorpay. Over 6 years at Razorpay, Pingal has held various significant roles, including Design Manager and Lead Product Design. He also has a bachelor's degree in IIT Guwahati.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Ramna.
and today, Pingal will be sharing his insights on getting ready for the industry from pixels to paychecks, which is a heading that I really like. And in this session, he will guide us through the journey of transforming design skills into professional opportunities, offering valuable advice on navigating the industry and understanding the practical aspects of a design career. So please join me in welcoming Pingal, and Pingal, you can take the stage from here.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Sajal. Thank you, Ramna.
Thank you.
All right. I'll get started. Let me know if all of you can see the screen and everything is visible. Um, you see the heading. It says from pixels to paychecks. I'll be talking a lot more about pixels, a lot less about paychecks. I think I have one funny slide about paychecks, and that's all. Uh, but I'd be happy to take questions towards the end. I think the pixels part of it is a lot more important. So I'll get started. But before I get into anything in detail, right? And I think both the hosts have already covered it, but I'll just give a quick intro and also try to establish why I should even be speaking about something like this. So I've been working with Razorpay for the last 6 years. I've grown up the ladder, and currently I'm an associate director there. I take care of a team of around 16 designers across product design, communication design, and a couple of and a researcher, a content writer as well. Right. I actually went into Razorpay straight after college. I did my college here. I did my bachelor's in IIT Guwahati. I was also the placement coordinator. I think that's irrelevant, but I just like talking about it. So, but yeah, I mean that's the more professional me, if I have to put it that way. I think I do a lot of things outside work, and I think Sajal had talked about how in the last couple of meetings you'd have heard about personal and professional life being kept separate, right? And I'm not going to go into that, but basically just giving a glimpse of other things that I do. I watch a lot of cricket, a lot of football, a lot of Harry Potter. I know there are just 7 movies to watch, but when you watch it, each movie 8 to 9 times, it becomes a lot. Um, I read a bit here and there. I'm quite a bit into Indian mythology as well. I like coffee. I like clicking pictures here and there. I travel a little bit. But yeah, that's about it. I also sketch on and off. I don't do a lot of sketching now, but um, you know, I used to, and that's how I got into design and all of that. So, but yeah, that's about me. I'll go ahead. So, a lot of us might be thinking, keep sure we're doing a design degree and we will find our place in the industry, but what is it that a designer adds to the entire plethora of people that are already there in the industry, right? You already have your product managers, your engineers, you if you, depending on the industry that you go into, you'll have salespeople. So a lot of different people coming in. What does a designer bring to the table? The first thing is you become the user's voice, right? Everyone else has a different thing to care about. I'll give you examples. A PM cares about getting the metrics higher. They need to ensure that the business keeps earning what it is supposed to earn. And an engineer cares about getting the right tech live, making sure the systems are scalable. But in all of this, who talks about the user? Who cares about the user? It's supposed to be the designer. If something that the user cares about is not getting taken care of, it becomes our responsibility to ensure that it does. You bring it on the table, you force people to hear about it, and you almost shove it down their throats if they're not listening to you. The second one is you become an experiment enabler. I'll tell you how. As designers, I think we're supposed to be blessed. I mean, some of us are, some of us aren't. I struggled a lot with this, but we're supposed to be blessed with the ability to come up with ideas just on the spot, right? You should have like 7 different ideas of solving the same problem, which then enables the org to conduct a lot more experiments. The organization can now think about, hey, I could do A, I could also do B, I could also do C, right? So you run all the experiments, and out of those, a real answer comes across. It's not as straightforward. You have all the ideas on the table, you discuss with the people, and then you get the experiments running. You also become a facilitator for all of these experiments to run. You get people on board onto your ideas, and then you ask for the experiments to be run. The final thing that is expected out of you, and sometimes it's looked at as a negative thing, but designers are supposed to be fidgety. One pixel being off is supposed to bother you. If things are not aligned exactly, you're not supposed to be okay with it. They'll ask you to be, everybody will ask you to be, but you're not supposed to be. You might still let it go through, but everywhere that you see a flaw in the experience, you are supposed to be fidgety or expected to be fidgety. If you're not, you'll almost be thought of as an engineer more than a designer, I'll be honest. Because I think all of us have sort of learned to live with flaws, but as a designer, it becomes our role to ensure that we still keep talking about it. So every meeting that you have, you keep going back and harping that same tune, saying, hey, this is still wrong, this is still wrong. You're going ahead with it. I know it's still wrong, you still need to go back and fix it. I'll go into a little bit more detail. But what I want to do first is, right, I think majority of us, if not all on the call, would be students. I was a student once, and as I moved out of college into the industry, I've been through just one company, but I think I've just worked all across the company, and that has given me quite a few different viewpoints. But being a designer, working and being a student is a little bit different. One thing that of course changes is, of course, you get a lot of money. So that's the paychecks part. You get paychecks now. You don't just do it because your prof is asking you to. You don't do it just because you want grades on your papers. You do it, one, because you're earning money, but you do it for a lot of other factors as well, right? So I'll go into that. That's the more important part. That's the meat of my presentation here. So the first part of it is you get to understand business. You need to, and you get to. I think both of those go hand in hand. If a designer doesn't want to understand business, if a designer doesn't want to relate to business, um, I think you are more of an artist than a designer. I have another slide on that. Again, a few of my opinions might be a little bit controversial. I'm happy to debate them out. I'm happy to also be wrong about it, right? I've been wrong all through my life. I'll be wrong once more. I don't think it really matters. But the first one is business. The second one is skill, of course, right? You already have a set of skills. You have been in the design setup for a while, so you would have a set of skills that you'd bring with you. Some of those you'd be great at, some of those you would be decent at, but you have that set of skills. You also now get to work with a lot of peers. So working with peers is another part of it. And finally, you definitely want to see growth. Growth comes in different forms. We'll get to it when we get to it. We'll start with business though. As designers, I think we are wired to sort of see flaws all over the place. So you're asked to discover one problem, you come back with 50 different problems, right? You're asked to say, just look at, hey, what is wrong with this vehicle? What is wrong with the design of this vehicle? Maybe you were just being asked to look at one particular most important thing that was wrong with the vehicle. You come back with, hey, the look and feel is wrong, the color is wrong, the handle is designed wrong. the entire shape of the back of the vehicle doesn't fit in a lot, too much of luggage, and you're trying to sort of put it forward as a family car. So there's so much that is wrong with it. But eventually it comes down to scope. You can't really just scrap everything and do everything from scratch. You would have heard the quote saying the world is your oyster, but you can't just travel the world in a day. You have to start from a country. So you start from here, and then you go into a continent, and then you go into the world, right? You don't start from, you just don't say, hey, I'm going to explore the entire world. So MVP is the word that is used in the industry, which is the most valuable product, right? Which means that you first figure out what brings most value to the user, and you design that. Now, when you talk about MVP, I think the basic understanding in the industry is that you build something that is functional. So you build a journey, a flow, or a product that works. It doesn't have to be delightful. It doesn't have to be finished. Maybe it's not even usable, but it works, right? As long as it works, as long as people know how to make it work, it's an MVP. I I think I differ massively there. You shouldn't be creating MVPs. MVPs, there are enough MVPs out there in the world. The only way that your product sells is if you create an MLP, not an MVP. An MLP is a most lovable product, a minimum lovable product, which means that you create the minimum scope, but a minimum scope which makes people fall in love with your product. You can only do it if you cut the triangle a little differently. You don't pick up the bottom of the triangle. You don't just go with you don't just pick up the Maslow's triangle and just sort of out of the hierarchy just pick up the bottom piece and say, hey, I'm good enough. What you do is, instead of doing it horizontally, you cut it vertically, and you get the goodness of all of these areas. So your scope is smaller, but it's functional, it's reliable, it's usable, it has finesse, and it has delight, which means within that scope you have built the best possible product out there in the industry. There is no product that beats you in that scope. Sure, there might be a product which might be doing three different things, but if you're doing one thing and you're doing it the best, you will sell. And of course, the complete picture will take time, right? I'll give you an example. Razorpay is trying to build a banking platform, which will help us compete with the entire industry, the banking industry, or HDFCs, Canara banks, state banks, all of that, but more at a business level. Now, if we were to get to where State Bank is today, State Bank of India is today from a business banking lens, I think it will take us a good 15 years. So we can't really start with that as scope. We can't say, hey, we are going to do everything that HDFC Bank does today. What we'll say is we'll solve one problem and we'll solve it best. So today what we have decided to solve is just the journey of making a payout in the best possible manner. So as a business, you want to pay somebody. We have taken just that as scope and trying to solve just for that. So we'll not do the best at loans. We'll possibly not be the best at some services here and there, but we will be the best at that money transfer bit of it. So the best experience of transferring money from account A to account B, we have taken the goal of that happening through Razorpay. Moving on, right? I think the second part is metrics play a large role in the industry. You can't be vague about you generally don't want to be vague about things. If you're vague about things, you get lost. So I'll give you an example. This is one of the goals that we start. So I work with a team that takes care of the Razorpay dashboard, which is the major product of Razorpay. So one of the goals that we started with was, hey, let's improve the dashboard experience of the founder persona. So founders of companies, they are coming onto the dashboard, they want to see what is happening with their money. Let's improve that experience. Now, you don't, if you put it this way, this is the first project that gets shelved, because how do you know if this project is working? How do you measure what you'll get out of this project, right? So you just rephrase it. I think it's just a very small nuance, but it's an important nuance. You just rephrase it into saying increase the dashboard NPS of the founder persona from XX to YY. Now, NPS is the net promoter score, which basically tells you how happy the user is with the product. So you have seen a lot of surveys on products, right, where um, people generally ask, hey, how happy are you with the product from a scale of 0 to 1? Are you happy with the product? What do you want to rate us on the Google, the Play Store or the Apple Store? Uh, this is that score, right? So you just rephrase it into saying, hey, we want to increase this score for this persona from A to B. And voila, you just do that, and it just gets picked up as a project, because now this becomes like a major thing. So what needs to happen. All right. So why do you want to be metric first? Why not be why not be just objective first? I want to increase the I want to make the experience better. Why is that not good enough? Why is there a need of a metric? It helps you define value. How much value? That XX to YY in the previous slide that I talked about, right? It lets you know how big of a change there is going to be. If you're going to, let's say we were at a score of 5 out of 100, and you're saying, I'm going to take you from 5 to 40, that's massive value. But if you say, I'm going to take you from 5 to 7, the product is still not loved. So you're not creating enough value. But this just helps you define that value. The second part is it helps you prioritize. The moment now you know that, this is the amount of value that you're going to get, there'll be another project that will give you a similar amount of value, or maybe lesser, maybe higher. Basis the amount of value that you get from these projects, you can then prioritize, okay, I get the most value here, I do this first. And it gives you a sense of progress, right? So you take a goal of taking the NPS from 5 to 40. You can't do it in a month. It will take you 3 months, 6 months in some cases. So, but on month to month, you can now measure progress. You get from 5 to 10 in month one, 10 to 20 in the next month, and 20 to 40 in the month after. So you can track that progress, because always progress is slower at the first, and then it picks up steam as you create a flywheel. You begin progress, and it eventually picks up steam. So just because of these three things, I think you need to have that metric in mind. The third part of it, and this becomes more and more important now in the current industry, we would all know the B2C applications, right? You would know a Swiggy, you would know a Zomato, Facebook, Instagram. But a lot of the industry is B2B. It's a business to business, maybe a SaaS platform, software as a service platform. All of the larger companies that you hear of, for example, an Atlassian is a B2B, Razorpay is for all purposes a B2B2C. We have a customer facing interface, but primarily we are a B2B business, right? So uh, you need to figure out that nuance between designing for an end consumer and a business. They operate very differently. For example, when I'm designing a banking platform for a customer and I design a banking platform for a business, my mental model has to be very different. It cannot be exactly the same. I'll again try and give you an example, right? When you're designing for a customer, you play on the emotion a lot more. So this is a checkout. Razorpay also has a checkout where the end consumer comes in and makes the final payment. This is a screen for the checkout platform, right? So here what we have done is we have tried to create emotion. We have tried to make them connect with the card. They see the card and they understand ki, oh, this is my debit card. So that emotion of feeling wowed by it comes across a lot more clearly. When something becomes successful, you see a success message at the bottom which has confetti blowing, and it gives you that feeling of, oh, something has gone well, right? Now that's part one. That's part one of doing it for customers. And when you design for customers, emotion plays a major role. Versus now when you go to businesses, efficiency is where the game, I think, majorly is, because businesses will be using this product day in day out. Sure, you don't do away with emotion altogether. It's not like, hey, I'll not do success messages because people know about it, but you need to optimize for efficiency. I'll show you another platform, right? Again, this is another platform that Razorpay had worked on. This is a platform that we created for an external bank, where we were basically creating bank accounts in conjunction with the external bank. And because we needed a platform where the internal Razorpay team and the bank team could talk to each other, is where we created this. Now you'll see a lot of information here. I could have just broken it down into saying, hey, I'll give you just this information first, this later, and all of that, right? But this has to be designed for efficiency. If a user wants to see everything all at once, they need this information to operate on this. You give it to them upfront, right? So that's I think the major difference. There will of course be a lot more smaller nuances. It doesn't mean you give up the basics, but you operate on this emotion versus efficiency wala model. All right, that's about business. I'm sure you might have questions. I'm happy to take them. I'll possibly end up my presentation and then I'll take questions as well. But I'll move on to skill, which is where I'll spend the most amount of time, I think. Um, like I started, right? I think all of us will be great at something. Now, first you need to figure out what are you great at. Are you great with Figma? Are you great with Photoshop? Are you great with Illustrator, After Effects? In my time in IITZ, I think Illustrator was my go-to tool, and I would design on it, and I'd lived through it and all of that. I Figma did not exist at that point of time. I did not have a Mac, so I did not have Sketch. Um, Photoshop and After Effects were a little too graphic-y for me. I was not great with graphic design. I was decent. I was not great. So Illustrator was my go-to tool, right? So you similarly, you might have something that you're great at, but it really does not matter. I mean, tools really do not matter. Um, there is a lot of reverence for skills, but they are real skills. Now, what do I mean by real skills? Problem solving is a real skill. Understanding the unstated user needs. You talk to a user, they told you 5 different things, but you figured out 2 extra things. You just saw that the user was tired, and you were able to derive that, hey, this user remains tired because of how they're operating on ground. So figuring out those unstated user needs is a real world skill. And then being able to develop eye-catching visuals. Again, the nuance here is the tool does not matter, because like I said, I started with Illustrator, I went in the industry, and I started working on Sketch, right? And then Sketch just went for a toss, and nobody uses Sketch anymore. And then I moved to Figma, and now Figma is my bread and butter, right? So the tools keep evolving. It doesn't matter. You need to understand the basic behind creating those visuals. How you finally implement it, I think you get the hold of it over time anyway. Even if you're not great at it, you might feel, hey, I don't know how to use Photoshop, I don't know how to use tool A, tool B, but do you know how to think of motion? How does element A need to transition to element B? If you know that, I think you are already doing great. You'll figure the rest of it out. um, this is the statement that I sort of gave at the start, right? That if you're creating something, and then it has no business impact, and there is no understanding of business, it's possibly just art. It's not design anymore. And then there's a fine line. You would have heard the statement of design being a culmination of art and science a lot of times, but I would rather put it as design is art, but it has a purpose, a clear purpose. And again, I've tried to put in examples of everything that I say, so I'll also show you something, right? So Razorpay is recently rebranded, not rebranded exactly, but sort of done a brand refresh of sorts. We were a very tech first company till last year. We have tried to be a lot more human first now. Now, what does that mean? Um, on the homepage of Razorpay, you go to razorpay.com right now, you would see a different homepage where there is a human sitting. We are talking about the human story now, right? So this was version 1, and this looks very nice, right? This is where we are talking about the founder of a company called Fool. They operate in all the items that you see on screen, actually. So this was iteration 1, and you'd see that this looks very nice. I think it came out very well. And this was iteration 2, where we gave it a lot of white space, and we sort of um, restricted the artwork on the side. Now, if I were to ask you just a simple question, and just say which is better. Actually, if any of you can respond, I'd want to hear from you. Which do you think is better, and why? Any of you. It would just make things a little bit easier for me to explain, I think.
The first one.
And why? Any
I think
reason. It's okay to get a reason wrong. I think we get all reasons wrong all the time. That's fine.
I like the composition better, and I like that the box isn't transparent.
Right. Okay. Great. I agree. The first one, if I just ask this question right, the first one is better. The composition is better. The background is better. And I think the entire imagery pops out of it. And it gives you a lot more immersive feeling, if I have to put it that way. So objectively, that is better. Uh, I would want you to open up razorpay.com right now, and you would see a version of this. And I'll tell you why. Um, the purpose, I'll go back again maybe. If you look at the screen if you look at the visual on top right, it doesn't feel like Razorpay anymore. It doesn't look like Razorpay anymore. It looks like we have created Fool's website, because the color is so overwhelmingly like the brand. It just feels like we've created their website instead of creating Razorpay's website. That is part one. Second, in the second version, uh, we were able to create that connectivity to Razorpay because we also use the Razorpay glyph in the background. It separates out the imagery from the text. So we wanted to tell about Razorpay and then connect it with the human. So the purpose eventually was to make it work for Razorpay, not sort of create the best possible artwork. We explored all directions and eventually we landed on this. I'll go into a little bit more detail also going forward. But this is what we ended up with, which is what I mean when I say, there needs to be a purpose. We knew the purpose that we started with. This served the purpose better than the other one, and this is why we went ahead with this. Again, open to questions. I'll take all of them at the end. Um, Now, it might seem very contradictory. Hey, I thought, things that look better, feel better, they should go live easily. And I think that nuance comes to you over time. You'll get to it over time. But what I do want to convey for once is that the basics don't change. All the basics of design that you're learning right now, that you will be learning over the next couple of years, or whoever is in the first year, the second year, you'll be doing it over time, right? Those basics don't change. For example, gestalt doesn't change, right? The law of proximity doesn't change. You still have to use it. It's not like, hey, you go into industry and gestalt now has a different meaning altogether. Grids don't change. They are what they are. And it's not like they become useless. You have to use them. Proportions again don't change. If you want to prioritize something, proportions is the first thing that comes to mind for me. The only thing is that it's no longer theory. So you're not sort of just clicking pictures of two things in proximity, one thing separated, and then you're saying, hey, I've understood gestalt now. You have to now make use of it and create meaningful interfaces out of it, right? So I'll give you some examples from Razorpay that we created. So now, for example, in this, what we have created three different, very clear different sections. And at the same time, with the button, we are saying, hey, this is what we want to do right now. But if you want to go into the depth of it, you want to understand what are the next steps, and you want to know what to keep handy, we are giving you all of that information separated out. This is something that we are actually working on. This is a work in progress thing. But what we have done here is sort of created a very randomized bento grid sort of a composition of all the different insights that your org might need. So we're trying to create something for the founder where the founder comes in onto the dashboard and they're able to find the top 10, 15 different things that they need upfront, so that they don't have to go around the dashboard figuring out what is wrong with their business, what is going well with their business. They just come here, they have an insight section, they go about it. But you'll see we have just used grids here. It's a broken grid. It's not a very straightforward grid, but it's a grid nonetheless. Again, something from the same project. We've again used a grid here, but what we have also done is we have one, you'll see the law of proximity coming into play here from Gestalt. You will see grids coming into play here. What we have also done is we have played with the proportion of the card and the priority of the card to say, hey, this is what I want you to see first. And this is what you can see if you want to. If you don't want to, you scroll down, I'm okay with it. But you come here, it's in a dark shade, and still I'm giving something a lot more prominence. And that is what I want you to see first, right? So just that's the takeaway. It just changes into, you're now supposed to use it all the time, make use of it all the time. Again, another use of law of proximity is just in this small space, right? Where I've separated the button out from the rest of it, because I want you to read this first and then take the action. I don't want you to confuse between, hey, do I just read this and take the action, or what do I do? So that's about it. But that's more on the hard skills part of it. And I think as designers, by the time you come out of college, we have a decent grasp of hard skills. We would have our niche again. Someone would be better at something, but we would have a decent grasp of hard skills. I think soft skills is where, I've seen a lot of great designers or people who have great hard skills falter. And what do I mean by soft skills? Soft skills is just the ability to sell your design in some form or shape. Sell your design, communicate your design, all of that, right? And why this important is because I'll give you three reasons of what are the first three ideas that or what are the first three reasons of ideas getting shot down. One is that it lacks rationale. In your head, you might have a rationale, but you're not communicating it. You might know why you choose A over B. Uh, If it doesn't have a rationale, it gets shot down very quickly, very, very quickly. That's the first thing that gets shot down. Second, if it doesn't account for user needs, essentially, if your design doesn't start from, hey, my user needs this, and this is why I'm designing this, you get shot down as quickly as lack of rationale. And actually, I'm the first one who does it. This is the first question that I ask: who's your user? Are you accounting for their needs or not? Is this what the user needs? Are you just designing because the business wants you to design what you're doing? And the last thing is, does the story tie together? So now when I'm seeing the larger picture, right, because a user doesn't come in and interact with those small pieces. I showed you a few small pieces just a couple of minutes ago. A user doesn't come in and interact with just that insights section. They will interact with the entire dashboard all at once. You have to find the best position to time that insight section. If the story doesn't tie in together and you're not able to communicate it well enough, you are shut down again. So how do you get better at it? You understand the listener. Who's the listener? For example, the way that I present, the way that I'm presenting today, and the way that I would have presented in front of my CEO or CTO would be very different. I know what they need. What are they looking for? What are those 5 questions that they want an answer to? I just go with those 5 answers. They are low on time. They'll give me 15 minutes. I have to convince them in those 15 minutes. Versus here, I think by design, I've been given a higher place, and all of you are just listening to me. So I have more time. I can go into a lot more depth, right? So understand the listener and make the listener care, whether it is emotionally, intellectually, aesthetically. Your presentation should make them care. If you're not able to do it through emotions, through intellect, make sure that the aesthetics catch their eye and they're hooked to the presentation. Somehow they need to be hooked. Once they're hooked, you have them, and now you can, sort of talk to them about all that you want. But it is very important to get them hooked first. First, try doing it emotionally. Talk about the emotions of the user. Then try doing it intellectually. Talk about how the problem is very complex, very ambiguous. None of them work. Your presentation needs to do its job. But eventually, you just need to make the listener care. If they're not caring, your project is not going through. Um, this again is a little bit controversial. You know, um, I think as designers and in academia, we are taught to think of the big picture. So you can't always lose the big picture, but it's not just always about the big picture. As I am one designer working in an org of 70 designers, right? So I can't, for me, the big picture could be everything Razorpay, right? But I can't do all the designs across Razorpay. I can do a small piece and I can do my best at it. So again, uh, the small pieces that you put together, they will matter a lot. I'll give you an example. This is, I showed you the homepage. This is the illustration that went on the homepage. You would see it live on the current Razorpay homepage also if you go to razorpay.com right now. But this illustration was created by a different person, and their whole job was to make that this portion of the page looks the best, works the best, tells the founder's story the best within the constraints, right? But eventually, this ties into a larger story. And the larger story is this: you have a page, there is a larger page that has gotten created, right? It has a carousel, there are multiple images like this. But you have to care about making sure that the small image does its job best. This page is almost infinitely long, right? So there are multiple sections of the page. We'll talk about all the offerings that Razorpay has to offer. But even if you look at these small images, you need to make sure that these small images do their job. For example, you want this image to very clearly convey what an escrow account is supposed to do. You want this image to very clearly convey what all can we integrate with, what are the different tools that we integrate with. You need to make sure that those small pieces tie up together to make the big picture. You cannot be the only designer working on the big picture. There'll be 5 of you, 5 different designers in 5 different domains, and all of it will have to come together at the end of it. Um, there's a book called Steal Like an Artist. It's by Austin Kleon. I've picked this line up from there. I like this line, and I think I use this line a little too religiously. But I think it's important for us to steal like an artist. And I'll tell you also the difference between stealing, copying, imitating, and all of that, right? But um, if you don't refer to what already exists out there in the industry, out there in the market, you are wasting your own time reinventing the wheel. Reinventing the wheel is a term that we'll hear over and over again in your life going forward. But you're basically uh, thinking of something that, or thinking of solving a problem that has already been solved. High likelihood that you will end up with the same solution. I'll give you an example. I, I don't know if all of you have used, but there are four large, quick commerce players out there in the market. There is Blinkit, there's Swiggy, there is um, Zepto, and there's also Big Basket. Dunzo used to be one of the players, but I think they're not there anymore. But this is one of the pages within their app. This is for Blinkit. I'll show you how this is how Zepto's looks like, and this is how Swiggy's look like. Now, I don't know who copied from whom. I think none of us will know anymore. Or maybe they did it individually and they came up with the same solution. But eventually, this is a solution that works. It helps me navigate quickly. It helps me search. It helps me filter. For example, Blinkit has done an additional thing on top where it lets me filter upfront, right? But the reason that it is like this is because it works. And then Big Basket, I think, went out of the way and designed something different. And while all of these are copied, and this is novel design in some shape or form, I think these three do a much better job than the fourth one. So ideally, if Big Basket would have copied, maybe the interface would have been much better. um, Again, like I said, I don't know who copied from whom, or if it was even a copy, or people did it individually and came up with the same solutions. If they did it individually and came up with the same solutions, it gives even more reverence to the fact that, hey, you might as well have copied. You came up with the same solution. You spent, and designing something like this and developing it would be more or less almost a 3-month job in an org at least. So you spend 3 months and you came up with the same solution. So might as well have looked at what other people are doing. But it's also important to draw that line, right? You should steal ideas, but you shouldn't copy. What do I mean by that is, this is on the right, you'll see a screen which Gemini has. Gemini is an AI tool. It's very similar to ChatGPT. It's Google's tool. They were Bard earlier, but this is what Gemini has. You go in at the first, they just tell you, hey, these are all the things that we can help you. It just gives you some sense of how to get started. What sort of a prompt can you put in? But when you're stealing, you need to steal from many. You don't steal from one. You just don't copy, hey, I've seen this and this works great, I'll just do that. You should study it. You should not skim it. Understand why they took those decisions. Try to think of what was Gemini thinking when they took that decision, and transform it. Don't just do what they did. This is an AI tool that we're creating within Razorpay. We took up the idea of starting with letting the user understand what Ray can do. Ray is Razorpay's assistant for you. But instead of using the same layout, the same way that they're doing it, right? What we did was we just used a card by card layout. I think for the Razorpay user, it made more sense for us to explain one thing after the other, because it was, in Gemini's case, it was just random prompts. Most likely nobody is going to start with that. In Razorpay's case, this is what the users are coming for. They want to understand what their success rate is. They want to understand what is happening with their money. So this is exactly the question that they're going to ask. So we wanted them to go through it one by one. So you just click on this and it'll shuffle and you get the next card coming up. All right. The last piece in skill is, and I think, being free minds and designers for all debates are the freest minds out there in the industry. Being free minds, I think we feel that process is a hindrance. But you need to think of process as an enabler. It's not supposed to be a hindrance. It becomes a hindrance when it's not used in the best form or shape. You can do all of this and get to the same position, or you have a process which takes you from point A to point B in the shortest amount of time. So it's a distance versus displacement game. In Razorpay, I think we faced this problem a lot. Every designer was following their own process, whatever worked best for them. And eventually I went in, I did a research, and this is something that I did myself, so I'm able to talk a lot more about it. I talked to a lot of designers within the Razorpay org and tried to find out, hey, what is your process? And try to take the best of it, create the most concise version of it, which helps designers come up with the eventual outcome in the lowest amount of time at the highest amount of fidelity, right? So you break it down into discovery, design, deliver, and study, and you don't go from stage 1 to stage 2 without finishing stage 1 completely. You should not start designing if you don't know what your problem statement is. If you have not agreed on what the high level solution is, the directional solution is, don't do concepts, right? If you don't know if you want to build a quick commerce app or an e-commerce app like Amazon, don't go into designs. You will fail. And if you have not designed, don't deliver. If your designs are not done, if you have not done your UTs, if you have not done your pre-mortem exercises, if you have not figured out what could go wrong, don't deliver it to engineering to develop. And if it is not delivered, if it is not live, don't start studying how the users are interacting with it. Only once each of these steps are complete, you go to the next step. And it's a circular process, actually. Once you have studied, you figure out new problems, you come back to discovery, and you do the entire journey again. But this is basically a model which I think now over time has helped designers within Razorpay also, sort of figure out how to do the best possible design in the lowest possible time, in the highest possible fidelity. And it helps me ask my designers as to, hey, how are you, deciding between A and B? Have you done this? Have you done your qualitative study? Have you understood the current scenario? Or are you just starting design without doing all of that? It helps me keep the designers honest as well. All right, that's on skill. The other two sections are pretty, I think they're not as elaborate. I think I wanted to focus a lot more on skill. And I'm sorry if this sounds like a lot of preaching. I'm just sharing my experiences, right? And it could be very different from what other people have felt, what other people have seen, what has worked for other people. This is what has worked for me. It might or might not work for you. You try it out, it doesn't work. I don't think it will cause any harm. I've tried to make sure that I've not put in the most controversial of my opinions, but I don't think it will cause any harm. It's good enough to try. But going into peers, right? I think right now all of the projects that you do, they are very design centric. So you do the design, you work with other designers. So all of us sort of think in a particular way. You won't be working with designers anymore. In the process diagram that I showed, you saw that there are quite a few people that you'll be working with. So if I break it down, this is how it looks. In the discovery phase, you'll be working with the product and business. In the design phase, you'll still be working with product, and you'll also be working with engineering, because you need to understand what the constraints are. In delivery, you'll be working solely with engineering. And then when the study phase comes in, you'll now be working with the analytics person as well, which gives you these four as your primary stakeholders that you're now going to start working with. You'll have a business need. You'll work with the PM who will define how to go about solving for the business need. You'll work with engineering who will implement the designs that you do. And you'll work with analytics who will first tell you what is wrong through numbers, and then tell you how to, which part of your design is not working as expected. The next point of it is, now because you're working with so many peers, as many peers as this, you also don't fail alone. It's not like there's no concept of design failure. Sure, you might be, you might not be delivering it on time, which means it's a timeline failure. But there's nothing called design failure. The product fails as a whole. If the user doesn't like the product has failed, which means there is shared accountability across all. So, and it works both ways, right? If you design and the design is not working, it's not just your responsibility, because the product and your tech counterparts also looked at it and said, good to go. Similarly, if the tech has gone live and there are edge cases which are getting missed, it's also on design to make sure that they don't get missed. So once the engineering team does their job, does their magic, and creates the interfaces, working interfaces, the designer and the PM are the first two people who should be using it. They should try out the flow end to end, see if there are edge cases that are getting missed, see if there are cases where the flow just goes all right. It you just did not account for that journey. So it works both ways. The entire product needs to function. It's not like design functioning, tech functioning doesn't work. Everything has to function as a whole. Again, a very important thing. And it holds true through all facets of life. I think it's not just about the industry and working with the peers and all of that, but I think everyone is better than us at something. Even today within design, I think, for example, when I was there, I think I was great at the UX solutioning part of it, but both research and UI, I think they were far better people than me in my batch. Similarly, when you go out in the industry, it becomes more than just design, right? You're not just working with designers anymore, like I said. Again, something that I relate to. You get knowledge everywhere. It's up to you to sort of go there and get it out of them. So, for example, discovery of problems. You might not be great at it, but it's the PM's core job. They are supposed to know it. Finding anomalies in data. Again, you might not be great at it, but it's the analytics person's job to be great at it. It's their job. Over time, you also can be great at it. It's your job also to at least get to the baseline in understanding data, finding the anomalies there, understanding the system constraints. Hey, can we even design something like this or not? Will we have the data to design something like this? I want to tell my user how much money they are spending day to day. Do we have the data for it? If we don't have the data for it, design all you want. It's not going live. It's not going in the hands of the user. It doesn't matter what you design. It doesn't matter what you conceptualized. If the system doesn't support you, you fail. This is where the engineering counterpart comes into play. They can tell you what is possible, what is not possible. Unless you understand all of it, you learn from them. You can't question them on what they tell you. You'll have to take their words for granted. They'll say you, hey, I don't have this data, or I can't do this. You'll never be able to question, why can't you do this? I think we can do this by step A, step B, step C. So unless you understand it deeply, you can't question them. And the last is selling to a real customer. This is what sales team and all the business teams excel at, right? What this will teach you is what is it that the real customer cares about. And when you do a UX research study and when a selling exercise happens, they're two very different environments, by the way. When you do a UX research study, they'll tell you all the problems under the hood. You will prioritize out of them. When you go to sell, they will only talk about the top 3 features that they need, and they'll talk about money. A lot of that conversation revolves around money. Now, how do you make the product seem important enough for the user to want to shell out money is where the game is. The sales team can help you understand that game. We run with peers. We run with 3 parts. The last of it. What does growth mean, right? You don't have exams anymore. You have no grades. You don't get grades anymore. You don't get an A plus for doing your job well. You don't get um, an E for failing to do your job well. On paper, this is what growth generally means. Is the growth that I have seen, to be honest. So I started as a designer, and then I became a senior. I became a lead. I became a manager, and then I sit at the AD post right now, right? But I think all of this again doesn't matter. Anyone who's watched this movie, they would know what I'm talking about. Uh, I think growth on paper is not the yardstick for success. Just because maybe I've been able to traverse 5 different roles in 6 years doesn't mean that I've been successful as a designer. I think uh, when you really grow, when actual growth happens, right, you're the first person to know it. You'll know that, hey, yes, I am growing. And this is a measure that I think I've got this over time. It used to happen to me in college as well, and I used to be very confused as to why is it happening. But everything that I did in first year, I'd look back at it in second year and be like, who was this person? Why was this person designing what this person was designing? It is just so bad. Um, and this has kept happening to me in all of my 10 years in design, 4 years in college, 6 years now, right? Across those 10 years, this has kept happening to me over and over again. And I've kept hating what I did a year ago. Sometimes it's even true for something that I did 6 months ago. But if you don't hate what you did a year ago, and you're still the same designer today that you were a year ago, maybe you're not growing fast enough. Maybe there is more to explore. There is more to do, right? And I'll just quickly take you through things that I did in Razorpay through my years, right? This is what I did in my first year. And now I look at it and I'm like, okay, there are 15 different problems here. It doesn't do its job and it is just so bad. And then I did this in my second, third year where I designed the entire, at least the homepage of the banking dashboard that we have. And now I don't like the colors. I don't like the font. I don't like how the information is placed. And then the year after, I designed the entire, onboarding experience for the banking platform. And I hate it with all my guts now. And this is something that I did, I think 3 months ago. I worked with a designer on this, but we did this together and I did this 3 months ago. This came out fairly well. I think it conveys, it's visually doing its job. It conveys what you're supposed to do. And still, just I think on Friday, me and another designer, we conceptualized something different for this. The point being, the moment you move on from a design project, if you don't start hating what you did in the past and you don't have 5 different ideas of how to make it better, I think you're not growing fast enough. There is more to do. There is more to learn. There's more space to grow into. The room is bigger. You're still sitting in one corner of the room, which is what I get to next, right? You're not making mistakes often, maybe. Uh, if you're not getting corrected enough, and you'll always have somebody who looks after you in the industry, by the way, nobody just lets a designer or any person be. You'll always have a manager, you'll have a lead that you'll work with. I have had the same manager for the last 6 months, and I remember how he used to operate with me when I had just joined, and how he operates with me right now, right? I used to get very directional feedback, very specific feedback. Hey, this padding is wrong. This padding on the left padding and the right padding are not correct. Nobody talks to me about padding anymore. Now he talks to me about, hey, I think you know um, the way that we're approaching this problem is wrong, and we need to approach it with a sprint model rather than doing the general thing that we do. So that changes, but this only comes when you make mistakes. When you make mistakes, you go to the person, you talk to them, and they correct you. So if you're not getting corrected often, and if you're not being asked to make something simpler, you've gone so out of the box that people are saying, hey, this might be great, but this is just too complex. This is just too cool for the industry, for us right now. Why don't you make something simpler? Maybe you're just stuck in that box. Maybe like I said, maybe you're stuck in that corner of the room. You've not explored the room. Maybe you're just stuck in Bangalore. You're just stuck in Guwahati. You've not explored Northeast. You've not gone to Shillong. You've not explored the entirety of India. Why not go to Gujarat and explore and see if there's something new there, right? I started with the world being your oyster, and I'm ending with you being stuck in Guwahati. So there's just some allegory there to be played with. Uh, but if you want to explore the world and you want to do everything, you can't be stuck in one place. You can't stay in Guwahati and just explore the Eiffel Tower on Google. That's just not good enough. You have to go to Paris, explore the Eiffel Tower, see the Eiffel Tower yourself. Only you go to Paris is when your parents from India will say, hey, why don't you come back to India? And if your parents not asking you to come back to India often enough, you have not explored enough, is one way to put it, right? In the industry, the way to put it is, if you're not being asked to create something simpler, you are not exploring enough. I'll just do a quick recap and then I'll open up for any questions that you might have. We talked about what a designer's niche is. We talked about how to understand the business. Then we talked a lot about how to get skilled. We also talked about how to work with peers, and then we eventually ended with how do you grow in the industry, right? I think there is a lot more to this picture. I've just been able to put together something very, I think when I was reached out a couple of weeks ago, I've been trying to think of what would make the most sense for the audience that we have. And I just thought that maybe this is what we could get started with. And I'm always open to chatting at a later point of time as well. So anything else I can talk about later on. But I think this, at least in my head, was a good head start. It just gave some sense of where to start. What does moving into the industry even look like? Is there a difference? And I'm sure that you might have seen quite a few differences, and you might feel intimidated. And that's not my job. That's not what I came into this conversation to do. But most importantly, right, you shouldn't be intimidated. I think we all took time. I remember my first month in Razorpay, and I was lost for all money. I thought I'll not last 6 months, 3 months in this org, and I'll just have to move on. And I think just mild show off, but I think 9 months later I was promoted, and it took time. It took me the first 6 months to get used to things, start delivering things, but I was able to deliver value quickly, and it led my growth charter in Razorpay. It just put me on a fast track of growth in Razorpay. Anyone who says that it will not take time and you should be prepared for it, I think is lying to you. So my advice, don't listen to them. Uh, you will take time, and it's all right to take time. You will get to it over time. All right, that's about it from me. I think I've almost taken a full hour. I don't know if you have more time to take questions, but I'll be happy to take questions. So I'm happy to take questions on all that I talked about already. I've not talked about design leadership and management. I've been managing designers for a good almost 3 years now, 3.5 years now. So I'm happy to talk about that. Anything on the growth path or anything else, I'm again, there are people who feel there are stupid questions. I'm not one of them. I think there are no stupid questions, at least not in this forum. So anything that you feel you want to talk about, I'm happy to do that. But yes, that's about it from me. I can see a
Yeah.
few questions already, but if there are people who want to speak up on chat, I'll take them first, and then I'll take up the questions on chat.
Yeah, it's okay. I can read out the chat questions to you, and anyone else who has any others can send them, so we don't end up
All right.
missing any question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay. So Rituja was asking if we are working on the same type of problems and ending up with the same kind of solutions, how can we differentiate ourselves and make ourselves visible as young designers entering the market?
Right. Um, uh, Rutuja, just I'll maybe ask you a follow-up question also over time. But one, I think I tried to answer that in some form or shape with the AI-based bot that Razorpay is also creating, right? Where we tried to steal from Bard and all the other AI bots that are there. But the point is not to copy. The point is to steal. And you always need to account for context. Always account for context. Uh, for example, let's say you go into I'll give you an example of Rapido versus Uber. For all money, right? I think they're doing almost exactly the same thing. But I think Rapido has done those small nuances. They've added that additional context. They've understood that people who are using Rapido, they are in the Indian market. Uber doesn't do much for the Indian market. They use the same application across the board. The same application works for them in US, works for them in India. Maybe some small nuances, but very small. What Rapido has done is they have made sure that they work for the Indian market. They right now they have very recently introduced a feature to uh, you know change the amount of money that you want to pay to the auto person. So you can actually choose to give them a tip upfront. You can offer them a higher amount of money. That is one. Rapido's OTP doesn't change, so it doesn't matter which trip you take, the OTP remains same. So people don't need to always keep checking. It takes time, especially if you think of a tier 2 market. It takes time for you to see the OTP, give the OTP, and they've just tried to make those small nuanced changes. Otherwise, the app is more or less the same, right? You hail a cab, you get a cab, you go on the cab, it lets you track the cab, you have safety options and all of that. But that nuance is important. But to apply that nuance, you need to understand who's that user that you're designing for. If you know that, I'm sure you'll be able to apply the nuance. You apply the nuance, you already stand apart from the crowd as a designer. 90% of the design crowd is doing exactly the same thing. Um, and I've talked about the large known B2C companies, by the way. There are a lot of other companies who are trying to find their feet in the market. And I think everybody's doing, I think almost 3 different companies in 3 different areas will be doing almost the same thing. The moment you apply that additional nuance, you're already setting yourself apart. Um, One question that I ask in interviews when I interview, right, is also why is this different from what product ABC did? Um, why did you not copy? And if you copied, then why should I not hire other designer, and why should I hire you? I think you've asked that almost that same question. The only way to answer that is if your answer comes back from the user and you tell ki my user is different in this particular manner, and this is why I've designed this a little bit differently. Or the other way to answer it is my brand is a little bit different in this particular manner. I'll give you another example. I was actually interestingly talking to a person from Misho, a person from Ropozo, who's very similar to Misho. But I also know this about Misho. Misho could have designed the exact same app as Flipkart, right? They did not. Their design language is one notch lower. Their the way that you order is a little bit harder for us, but they designed it for tier 2 companies and tier 2 consumers, and they designed it for reselling. The insight that they have is if it looks very similar to Flipkart, these people are uh, almost intimidated by it. They feel ki, hey, this is too good a product for me. I can't really use it, which is why they have toned down their design language a bit. They've used colors which people in tier 2 industries can actually relate with. So brand is the other story that you can tell. If you want your brand to reflect in a different way, then you also account for it. I hope that answers your question, Rutuja. Let me know if there's a follow-up.
Yeah, I think that was very clear. We also have another question from Rituja. She asks, how much and in what ways should we incorporate AI in design?
Uh, uh, I'll ask here. I'll actually ask you a follow-up question first. Do you think AI will replace designers, and if not, why not? Uh, if Rituja can answer, if you can enable her to answer.
Yeah, Joel, is it okay to give Rituja mic access? If that's something you can do.
I assume he said yes.
Rutuja, you have mic access now.
I
Hey,
don't
Rituja,
think so. AI will completely replace because there are some human aspects that AI cannot like put
give me an
together.
example. Give me an example.
Uh, so when we are making a persona is something very human part of it that we cannot ask AI to make because
What will you
that
make?
is based on
What will you make a person on the basis of?
so the kind of project we are working on that the user of that project specific user like you gave
I
example of
will
nature.
give you. I will give you how to make AI do this. Right? You do the research. Sure, you do it on your own, or maybe even AI does that. You give AI the questions, and AI does the research for you. It gets all the data from customers, and then it creates the persona for you. Why do you think you will do a better job than AI at creating that persona?
Because we have sat with that person, we have interviewed, so we know what that person might be feeling at some point
Sure.
and how they'll react to something. We have observed them through our eyes that AI has not done.
Sure, fair enough. So the way that I look at it, right, AI will eventually start enabling the baseline design that gets created. So if you are very, if you're an average designer, it might be possible to replace you by AI. That is the bottom line of it. If you are copying designs, it might be easy for AI to replace you. Actually, there are already AI tools where you put in a prompt and basis all the similar apps that are there, they'll create an app for you, right? So, like Rutuj, I think you answered your question yourself. What AI can do for you is create that first set of persona. You still have to vet it, see if it accounts for the unstated needs or not, and if there are unstated needs that you add it. So you get AI to do the first level work for you, you become a reviewer, and you add that extra nuance on top which only you as a designer can bring. AI at the end of it is still a machine. There is only so much that it can understand, right? Maybe we'll land in a time and space when uh, basis what the AI sees on the camera, it can also figure out if the person is tired, if the person has some other problems. Um, but we're not there yet. And even when we get there, I think it will still help you get that first part of it done. If that is what you were doing as as a designer or as a researcher, then yeah, I think it is easy to replace you. But if that is not what you're doing and you are making sure that you get that additional layer on top, um, one, you are safe as a designer and you will excel very well as a designer. Second, to answer your question, you use AI just for that first part of it. We use a research tool called Marvin and Razorpay, which um, it creates the transcripts on its own, and it also helps us get a very high level view of the transcript, but it still misses out on points like, hey, this user was just not interested in the call. So whatever insights we might have got from this user would have been very muddled with that entire emotion. AI can't help you do that. It will do baseline work, it will not take you any further. So you should use AI, yes. So on the Razorpay homepage also, right? All the illustrations that you see, there is some amount of AI that has been used. We have not used real human imagery. We have made an AI model uh, get the human imagery and put some layer on top of it and created this composition. But the eventual composition has been created by the designers in-house. It's not like AI gave this entire thing all at once, right? The idea to put the glyph, the logo of Razorpay in the background, the idea to put this information here, all of that is a designer at work. But once you have that idea, figured out that idea, the end output is where AI has come into assistance. So yes, you should be trying to use AI as much as possible to get the final outcome. I think that is coming out of all the tools is pretty great, but it will not help you in brainstorming. It will not help you in ideation.
Right. I think that answered. Um, I also had this question, and I think that was a great answer. Okay, so Mayank asks, earlier you talked about finesse. How do you see that? Second, technical problems.
I'll answer the question. I'll
Yeah.
try and give you an answer, right? I don't think there is a straightforward answer to it. There are a lot of layers that need to be applied. What does finesse mean for that org? Just like I said, for Misho finesse and for Cred, if any of you have used Cred, the level of finesse, I think there is a vast difference, and there is a reason behind that vast difference. So first, you have to apply that layer. Second, I think there is a standard that every org sets for itself, where they say, hey, this is the level of finesse that we want to achieve, right? So once you get into an org, I think it is the job of the org to make sure that you understand what that level of finesse is. It is still subjective, but you will see 15 different examples of interfaces across the org, and that is what you should look to achieve as a bare minimum. But that will again make you a baseline designer. You're not pushing the bar. You need to ensure that that finesse is higher than what your org has achieved in general. Third, and this is a more user-led way of doing it. So every time that we release out a new feature, we try to run a survey asking if this is better than what the user had previously, right? And once the user says it is better or it is worse, we add in that extra layer of questions. Hey, is this worse because it is functionally bad, or is it visually bad and you don't feel as delighted by it? Delight is a word that customers relate to, and I think customers figure out that delight when they're looking at an interface. Their sense of delight is a lot more visual. Their sense of delight is not related to a journey. You might make the journey very small, but if the visuals are there, then they are delighted. So you ask the delight question. That gives you the answer more often than not. But I think it's very subjective. You will have to establish your own baselines. You have to get it corrected over time as you work with more and more people, and people keep correcting you saying, hey, this does not meet the bar. You will try and push yourself and you will get to that bar. Eventually in an org, you'll get to know when you have got to that bar. I make it a point to talk to my designers all the time and tell them, hey, this design that you did that does not meet the bar, but it is okay because you did it in a lesser amount of time. But the next one that you're doing, we will spend more time and we will try to get to it, right? And till the time we don't meet that bar, meet that finesse level, we keep going at it.
I think Mayank also followed up to the question saying, what about personal projects?
What about personal projects? Um, Similar to how you have mentors in org, right? I'm sure there would be mentors that you would look up to within within college if you are in the early years of your college, right? If you're in the first or second year, you would have somebody in the third or fourth year, actually multiple people in the third or fourth year who you would look up to, who you can go to and ask them, hey, how does this look? How does this work? What is wrong with this? Or if you're in the final year, then you would have somebody who's just passed out and is now working in the industry, and they would be able to help you a lot better on this. What you should do, okay, so there are two parts to it. One, what you can do yourself. You should first try and replicate what already exists in the industry, right? uh, can you come up with the same level of finesse that a Swiggy has on all of its flows? If you can, then can you conceptualize that on your own for a different domain, a different application? For example, Swiggy is in the food domain. Can you create a very similar app? If you were to design a quick commerce application for clothes, would it be different? Would the interface be different? Is there even a use case? Can you solve a problem like that, right? And then you look at that finesse, the UI finesse as well, because now instead of the layout where I showed, where you have filters on the right and then you have the entire layout on the left, you might need to change the layout. But do you achieve that same level of finesse? So that is what you can do on your own. Go to Dribble, look at all the different ways that people have solved it. Can you come up with something better? Second is the feedback route, and I think the feedback route is uh, essential. I don't think that is capable. If you do it yourself, I don't. There is only so much that you can get to because you have not seen the world. There are people who would have seen a little bit more. And the quickest way to get there is the feedback route. You will eventually get there by trying out more things, by pushing the bar yourself, but it'll take more time. If you get directional feedback, especially at the early years, right? If you get directional feedback and you know what to fix, it becomes a lot more easier. Otherwise, you'll not know what to fix. You'll just know, yaar, ye acha nahi lag raha hai. This is not as good as what I see on Dribble. I see a lot of cool things on Dribble. Cred is a lot cooler. What I'm creating is not as cool. But you'll not know what is not as cool, what is not working. That is where you need somebody to come in and tell you, hey, this is what is not cool. This is what you need to change. This is how you get here.
Yeah, I think Mayank's doubts got clarified. Ramna, do you have any other questions to ask?
Let's end the talk with the fun question. Ashil Goswami asked, please summarize your BDS experience at IIT.
I don't know what sort of a summary you're looking for. I was actually part of one of the last batches that got in through JEE. So I am a part engineer, a part designer in some sense. My first year was spent doing all the engineering courses. I also actually, so I had two branches in mind when I got in. I loved maths, so I wanted to get into MNC or design was my other option because I was decent at sketching, and that is all that I understood about design at that point of time, right? But I think what the BDS course, and I've also seen, I've also worked with designers who have come from an engineering background, a core engineering background, like they've done biotech and then they've gone into design, right? A lot of the designers in Razorpay, I think about 4 to 5 designers in Razorpay are from IIT Roorkee. IIT Roorkee doesn't have a design course. But what I think it has helped me is first being able to think of that larger picture, even knowing that there is a larger picture that exists. I think our professors excel at that. That is what I was able to take away part one. Second, it was a lot of fun. It was fun watching all the engineering students get dragged down the mud every mid sem, every end sem, and designers having almost sort of done all of their work beforehand. But because it was such a hands-on course, it also did not make me feel like the transition into industry would be as difficult. I was not great at visuals, so I had to work on it my first 3 months when I got in. But otherwise, I think just the process part of it, I knew the process. I knew what had to be done. When I was given the first project, my first question was, how do I talk to the users? How do I understand them more? I knew that that is the first thing that I had to do. What I've seen in a lot of other designers who don't come through a design course is that they get to designing first. They get the project, they know, okay, I need to create this interface. They get into interface first. I knew that my first question had to be different. It cannot be okay, how do I design this, right? So knowing the process, being hands-on, and also sort of just learning those basics, the gestalt, the grids, the proportions that I talked about. I think I was taught by Uday sir when I was in college about this. But just knowing all of that, and now being able to use that in actual world design is what comes into play. I can't tell you the number of times that I've corrected other designers saying, ki, hey, the law of proximity is being missed here. I don't say it that way, but I see my point being key. I'm not able to differentiate between, do you want to connect this portion of information to the one on top or the one below? If you want to connect to the one on top, then add spacing in between, right? Reduce spacing between top and middle and add spacing between top and bottom. So even basics like that, I think we are wired to think of it that way. At least we should be, if we do the course well enough. But yeah, my experience was great. I have done a lot of things outside design, and I think the course allowed me to do it. I was a very active participant of Alcheringa as well. I was the PR head in my year, and then I did a placement com. So I think it allowed me to do all of that. Me being generally decent with a lot of these things, and it was very hands-on. I think hands-on is the best part of it. That's worked the best for me.
Right,
I'm sorry.
yeah, that
I go very overboard when I answer, but yeah.
no, this was great. I think the amount of detail that you go into and also making us realize that we already know answers to some of the questions we've asked it was really impactful. And this talk also covered a lot more than we expected. A lot about the actual skill based aspect of it rather than just how life is at corporates and stuff. So we have learned all of that through different talks now. So yeah, thank you so much, Pingal, for joining us today. It was brilliant to be able to learn from you.
Thanks a
And
lot, Sajal. Thanks, Ramana, for having me.
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you, sir.
it was great. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
guys. Thank you
Thank you for
all
joining us,
for
guys.
joining as well. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Folks, if you have any other questions, I'm happy to chat anywhere else. I'm on almost all of the platforms. Might be active here, might not be active there, but yeah, I'm happy to talk to any of you folks at any point of time. Whenever time comes through, I think the work-life balance part of it, I did not talk about. I did not talk about it for a reason. I don't have much of it. But yeah, I'll be happy to talk to you any of you folks at any point of time. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Pingal.